I don't know if many people in America may not remember this, but Sarkozy recognized the council from the beginning, already in February. One of France's most disgusting characters, I happen to know this guy, is Bernard-Henri Lévy. He's a left-bank intellectual, nouveau philosopher and all that. This guy who went to Benghazi, he met with the council. He called Sarkozy from Benghazi and said, look, we need to recognize these people immediately. They are the legitimate government. So Sarkozy, before anybody else, before the UN, before resolution, whatever, recognized these people and start sending French intelligence and covert operation officers to Benghazi to link with these people already there. So this, from the beginning, was a French war. The Americans and the Brits came later. The French and the British redacted the UN Resolution 1973. The Americans came on board because they also saw an opening. But there are so many reasons that Gaddafi was isolated that it was impossible. He reached an end of the line. In fact, I'm writing, as we speak, a story of what red lines Gaddafi crossed. There were so many. Well, you can go forever lining them up,
In summation, give me your research take on why this happened. We know he was trying to unify Africa, create their own currency, their own water supply. Yes. He was a dictator, but whether it was because of his arrogance or because he cared, he was building up Libya from a backwater to the most wealthy per capita in Africa. That's why so many African nations are still defending him. So I want you to speak to why they went after him. But then in closing, where is this going to go? We were told this was done because there was a humanitarian disaster with a few protesters being killed because it was confirmed a lot of them were operatives and were violent. I'm not defending what happened. The point is all of them weren't just protesters. Now, most of the country without power, water. We know there are confirmed reprisals against black Libyans. They're just dragging them out of their houses and killing them. No doubt the Gaddafi forces are engaged in some reprisals against people as well, but it's not on a racial issue. So where is this going? I mean, did Europe want to knock this country back into the Stone Age like they did Serbia? Is this the Western powers following that policy of deindustrializing any country that isn't part of Western Europe or the United States?
Well, basically, Alex, Libya has to be sold to the rest of the world as an example. So you don't antagonize the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. You don't antagonize the Western bankers. You don't antagonize European corporations or Americans for that matter. You don't nationalize our oil industry. You don't invest in humanitarian projects in sub-Saharan Africa, as Gaddafi was doing. There is, you mentioned, and there is a very strong racial element as well. Libya now is turning more into an Arab country, perhaps an Arab emirate, than an African country. Prejudice against blacks in Libya is enormous, even before, especially from people in eastern part of Libya, in Cyrenaica. There's a report in The Independent today, my friend Patrick Coburn, one of the best reporters in the world. He talks exactly about racial prejudice from the rebels, let's put it this way, against blacks. And it doesn't matter if they had been living for 10, 15 years with a residence permit, legal job, education. Doesn't matter. They see sub-Saharan black Africans in block as mercenaries. This is horrible. The repercussions can be horrendous. So basically, Libya.
Well, I remember you and others warning about this. Webster Tarpley, a journalist, historian, 3 months ago said that in the East, when they took areas, they were lynching and killing blacks who just have as much right as anybody to be in Africa. I mean, it's the African continent, hence the name Africa. And now the Washington Post and others admit, but it's buried, that, yeah, there's big giant piles of dead black people, and they're just taking women, men, you name it, out of their houses and killing them with no proof. And this should be a bigger issue, that you've got racial genocide going on, or an attempt at it, and it's not even an issue here.
It's true, but at least let's put it this way. It's a start when you have a Reuters story or it's in one page 12B or whatever, New York Times or Washington Post. At least now they're talking about it because there were massacres on both sides. And now we have to talk about the fact that there have been massacres against black Africans, basically committed by people from Eastern Libya.
Exactly. Gaddafi's people, it's been shown, are killing personnel that they had in prisons, and that's wrong and is a war crime. But just to go out and randomly have no proof and just kill people is incredible. Pepe Escobar, incredible information. In closing, from your over a decade traveling around Central Asia, Middle East, covering this, being the first to break a lot of information that turns out to be very accurate later, from your sources and studying this, where is Libya going to end up in 6 months, a year? Because there's many tribes, they're all in reprisal attacks now, and the country that's been basically built up and industrialized, what's going to happen to this huge population?
Look, looking at the facts on the ground and trying to extrapolate in a very realistic manner, we can say that there's a very strong possibility of two guerrilla wars in Libya within the next 6 months. One would be Gaddafi forces against a weak TNC-based government in Tripoli. To answer this question, you must know how many tribes are actually supporting Libya and how many tribes Gaddafi can buy within the next few weeks or months. The second possibility is a guerrilla war by these Al-Qaeda-linked guys, the Islamists, the LIFG people, against NATO, in case they are sidelined from power in Tripoli, and in case they start viewing pure blowback once again, that this is a foreign invasion and we're going to have NATO troops, or even if we have troops from the Emirates or from Qatar, they're going to be foreign troops, occupation troops.
So you're talking about a triple cross.
I'm sorry?
You're talking about a triple cross.
Yes.
Double cross Gaddafi that tried to make deals 7 years ago and coming out of the cold and give up his WMDs, then bring in Al-Qaeda, double cross them again.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to have a twin guerrilla war against a weak central government, against the NATO or Qatari Emirates occupation forces. We're going to have a tribal war because the tribes who rebelled against Gaddafi, there are still very, very strong tribes that are behind him, including the Warfala tribe, which is the largest in Libya, almost 1 million people. And Gaddafi's wife, who just was spotted in Algeria yesterday, she belongs to the Warfala tribe. So can you imagine a scenario of tribal civil guerrilla war at the same time in Libya? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's very possible. Let's talk again in 6 months.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Pepe Escobar, for joining us. I know you write for Asia Times and your book's out. Are there any sites people should visit to learn more?
No, basically Asia Times. I write for Al Jazeera as well, but you can imagine how difficult it is to write for Al Jazeera at the moment, when Qatar and Saudi Arabia are involved in a counter-revolution in the Persian Gulf. So it's very tricky.
I bet. Yeah, they've certainly been big time involved helping put in propaganda to lead to this in Libya. And I tell you, as this thing unravels and unfolds and this humanitarian crisis deepens, we have to all ask ourselves, this new model of globalization where they go in and fund rebels to go after the central government, then the West comes in and backs them. This is definitely a new form of dirty war.
And we haven't even talked about NATO's role, Alex. We could go on forever on that as well.
Briefly, 1 minute on NATO's role.
Because NATO wants the Mediterranean as a NATO lake. This was approved last December in a summit in Lisbon, as part of the guidelines of NATO for until 2020. So Libya was out of the grid, just like Syria is. That's why a lot of people who know how NATO works are saying sooner or later there's going to be a NATO intervention in Syria, because Syria has a Russian naval base, and Syria is not part of NATO or not part of any partnership with NATO. NATO wants to control the Mediterranean for the West, more or less recolonize Northern Africa, especially now with Libya as a kind of NATO protectorate. And AFRICOM, which is the Pentagon's African Command, finally is going to have a base in Africa, because for the moment they are in Stuttgart, Germany, because nobody in Africa wanted them. Now they can have their own base in Libya. So the circle is closed.
Well, you're right. Again, over 2 years ago, we covered in the Obama deception that there would be invasions of North Africa because that was the Pentagon plan. I mean, they hide all of this in plain view. Now they've got all those modern military bases, airfields, water supplies. Look out, Africa, because they're going to start the CIA-funded coups, and rebel forces are about to spill into all of the country. And now all of Africa is another globalist battlefield. Pepe Escobar, thank you so much for your amazing insight.
Thank you, Alex. Great pleasure. Thanks very much.
Great pleasure talking to you. Well, that was our extended interview with Pepe Escobar. We're going to go to break and come back with more. It's Infowars Special Report.
You don't need me to tell you that humanity is in a deep crisis. Everyone can feel it. We know a tectonic struggle is now taking place between the forces of freedom and those who love darkness, bondage, and enslavement. Yes, my friends, evil is rising. But take heart. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Recently, New World Order operative Hillary Clinton admitted they're losing the info war.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
The globalists are scared. They've overreached. The future of the info war is in your hands. Join prisonplanet.tv. Download the thousands of special video reports, ebooks, and more, and get them out to everyone you know. Continue to spread the word about the broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and every other globalist propaganda platform. We are going to use their system against them. The info war now goes into high gear.
Anti-tyranny activist and reporter Luke Rudkowski confronted the owner of the World Trade Center complex, Larry Silverstein. He questioned him in front of the corporate whore media about why he had ordered the demolition of Building 7. And then he confronted the media and asked them, why haven't you been asking these important questions?
Again, this is not one of the Twin Towers. This is a building that fell just moments ago. It had been burning for hours. There's Building 7, 47 stories down to the ground.
World Trade Center 7 has been the Achilles heel of the U.S. government's official fable about 9/11. How could a 47-story building collapse at free fall speed into its own footprint? The government does not offer an explanation, as there is nothing relating to World Trade Center 7 in the 9/11 Commission report. Larry Silverstein, owner of the towers, claims he gave the order to pull it, which is an industry term used by the explosive demolition industry.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
And Dan Rather reported seeing the same thing on 9/11.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
He then backed up that statement when asked years later.
But I was reporting live at 9/11, and I reported what I saw and tried to describe it as accurately as I know how.
Luke Rudkowski, founder of We Are Change, has confronted WTC7 owner Larry Silverstein on several occasions, and Larry refuses to answer his questions.
In America, you made an infamous quote saying, "Pull it." Now, you later released a press release saying that was the firefighters outside World Trade Center Building 7 on 9/11. It's two questions. If you meant to pull the firefighters out, why didn't you say evacuate the firefighters? And there's also FEMA reports and first responders that I know personally that firefighters were already out that building before you made that statement. So can you please clarify your statement?
Can we get a response, sir? Move on to the next question, please.
This is Luke's latest attempt, which is on the heels of the 10th anniversary of the worst false flag attack on American soil.
Last time we talked, sir, I asked you if you could address some of the 9/11 conspiracy theories that you are accused of. Sadly, your response has actually invited more of them. I mean, for the record, everybody knows your infamous comments on PBS where you said pull Building 7 on 5/25 on the day of 9/11. Your official response was that it was the firefighters. My question is, it was pretty clear that you meant the building, and if it was the firefighters, they already are outside the building by 12 because the water lines were broken.
Ask the question.
And the fire chief that you said you spoke to, Fire Chief Negro, denies talking to you on that day of 9/11. Can you answer those questions and address the theories against you?
I suggest to everybody's consideration that we all look at the thousands of pages of testimony that have been rendered in the many years since 9/11, and let's use today's session for something that's...
Are you aware of testimony of bombs in the building before the building collapsed, sir? Are you aware of that testimony? Sir, there's testimony by Bear Jennings. Sir, you don't have to touch me. Listen, I'll walk away. All I'm asking is a question. I don't have to be kicked out. It's a legitimate question. You don't have to put your hands on me. But all I'm saying is, no, I'm not. I'm here asking. The question was not answered. That's why I have a grievance. Okay. Larry Silverstein was told not to come into work. That's why him, his daughter, and his son never showed up to work on 9/11. He put an insurance policy on the buildings. Reporters, do your job. Please ask some questions.
As you can see, Larry is still not answering his questions. This is Rob Dew reporting for Infowars.com Special Report.